Hey, I'm Chris, and with me is Rob, and welcome to Screensleuths. We're going to tackle the first two episodes of our new show, Sugar. Rob, take it away.
Yeah, Chris, we are thrilled to have another new original show to talk about. And first things first, I want to hear your feelings about what we've seen through the first two episodes.
I'm still mid-range on the show. I don't not like it. I don't love it. I'm getting used to the cinematography and the quick cuts of the older movies and the different scenes going through. So I'm going to keep watching. Obviously, I like the show, but I haven't made a full decision on it yet. I'm intrigued. I'll give you that much.
Yeah, I'm a fan, if nothing else, for the mystery they're setting up. Obviously, if you've been with us on Screen Sleuths, previously crappy reviews, you know we love a good mystery, and I think they're setting up a really good one in this show, which is something I really like. I also really like that they're giving us a private investigator character who's, dark and mysterious, but he's not just like a complete a-hole. I think that's a trope in a lot of these movies, a la like you expect him to be like a John Wick, where he's just dark and broody and he can kick the crap out of everybody, but he has this very happy and light side to him. So I kind of like that in the character. It gives it a little bit more depth. So I'm a fan so far. I'm definitely looking forward to episode 3.
All right. Now, so you brought up a good point that we get a different version of the PI character than we're used to from a Humphrey Bogart movie or something that we're used to seeing from old Hollywood. So who is John Sugar? What makes him different? What do you think his history is based on what you've seen so far?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a big part of the show, and I think it's what's going to lead us to a lot of, backstory for him and even some of the things we've already seen. My, I'll say, overarching theory about John as a person is he is in this line of work because of what obviously happened to his sister Jen. We obviously don't have a whole lot of information about that just yet, but he's dropped her name a few times in the show. He's talking to Ruby, and when he sees the pictures of Olivia, whatever that tragic event was, is, like I said, what led him to this line of work. And I believe, as the nice person we've seen him to be, he's also blaming himself in one way or another for what happened, which is also what leads to that generous, giving, kind of nicer side that we see out of him compared to that normal dark and brooding person.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it was interesting that you brought up the perspective you did because I didn't quite see it like that. But after talking to you offline about it, see the character differently. And it's interesting because, to your point, it's a different way of looking at the PI character that we normally see. But it seems like he might have been rooted in the traditional character, which is why he has exceptional fighting skills and excellent at what he does, this John Wick-like character, but he comes across so much nicer as if he's trying to make up for something. So I think there might be an old-time character still in there, and it's him trying to kind of claw his way back or out of that version of himself, because maybe what happened to his sister is directly correlated to something he was doing or not doing in his life when that happened.
And I also think the movies that they cut in and that he almost references at certain points, I think it shaped him a little bit. I think both from a writing standpoint and as a person standpoint, if you want to think about his character as a person, he grew up watching these movies. So he gets a little bit of that swagger, the Clark Gable, appearance when he walks in a room. He gets a little bit of that from the movies, but it's also a little bit the basis for his character from a TV show standpoint. So going down that route where he is that classic PI, but with a little bit of a twist.
No, I agree. I liked it. I had brought up to you offline. I felt like after talking to you, I got this Mulder X-Files like comparison in my head to the relationship he has with his sister, where he's on this path and he's doing these jobs, but he's always kind of doing it with this other case in the background for him. His sister's always in the background. And if you ever watch X-Files, Mulder went through his career with the FBI, but he always kind of was looking for what happened to his sister. It was always like a driving force for him, and it took him down the direction of the FBI, just kind of how like Sugar goes down this investigator track with this overbearing weight always kind of weighing on them.
And I think the other piece that I am piecing together here myself, obviously we're very early in the show, this is all theories based off the information at hand. Whatever happened with his sister, I firmly believe he has some form of PTSD, where I think is also leading to a few of the other things we're seeing in the show. The twitching that we see with his arm, there's a piece where I actually believe the camera work that they're doing, while one, I believe it's just an artistic choice to be able to use all the different modes of film and how it's focusing on things. but the quick cuts and at times you'll notice the conversations blend together. He's having a conversation with Melanie, or he's having a conversation with Ruby, where you're hearing two parts of the same conversation at once. And I think the PTSD is causing him to black out a little bit or disassociate a bit. And I think the camera work too is letting us in his mind a little bit. I think they're using the show. We also get his perspective, obviously, firsthand narration, where I think even the audio editing and the camera work is to kind of get us in his head. And I think that's also what's making him up as a person, right? That PTSD that Ruby wants him to get checked out because of that twitch we see in his arm. All these pieces are kind of adding up to a whole view of who John Sugar is.
Those are all great points. And I want to, so just to clarify for the audience, because some people might not have picked this up or noticed it, who is Ruby in the show? What is her role? Because obviously John's his own man doing his own thing. He's well-traveled, he's excellent at his job, but he goes back and Ruby seems like she's kind of his boss. She has some control over what happens, and she seems upset that he took a job that she wasn't into. Who is Ruby? What is her role in this show? So if people didn't know, they'll have a better idea of it going into episode 3.
Yeah, Ruby, I think, is his manager in a way, if you will. She's his confidant and manager for all of the work that he does. That being said, I do believe it's not just him, and it's because she says in that conversation, I manage 19 now, kind of referring to it's not just John that she's working there. And Jonathan Siegel reached out to her first. His attorney reached out to her first, but then still reached out to John, and she kind of, took a little bit of offense of, oh, you still went and took the job, even though I said you were unavailable. So she's obviously just a managerial capacity, if you will. He's kind of his home base for work.
But we think that the invitation that he got is a work invitation, like the logo that we see on there is just...
Yeah.
Go
that
ahead.
was my assumption. I'll just put it that way, right? It's the gathering of all of these similarly driven people that she manages to essentially meet up every now and then. That would explain why there wouldn't be much more than a date and a time on it, so that all of these, kind of under the cover, very discreet people can meet however often that may need to be.
Okay, so next up, Olivia, main character in the show. What are your thoughts?
I have lots of thoughts. I think, obviously, at this point, we haven't seen Olivia yet. We don't know if she's actually safe. I'm under the impression she is, but I think what we can kind of look at right now in terms of Olivia's character is why she's in trouble or in this situation. Maybe not who she is as a person so much just yet, but there's one key piece. And I know I told you this offline, and I think we agree on this, that sometimes Chris and I are watching a show on a TV show level too, where we think about, why would the writers put it in this situation? Why would they edit it this way? And he specifically mentions to Melanie about getting Olivia interested in women's rights movements and how it seemed to potentially have given her a purpose, that was what got her clean when she was having trouble with and needed to go to rehab, all these things. But that gave her something to work towards and work on. And it seemed like something that in the moment could have been a throwaway line, but I think to both Chris and I, we would see that as a key point. Otherwise, why would it be brought up this early in the show, especially, right, before we get a whole lot of information? So that's kind of my jumping off point. We're going to see a big tie-in to, I also believe, multiple women here, looking at Melanie, looking at Carmen and her sister, who were potentially working towards a whether it's protests or some kind of movement in any shape or form with women's rights.
Agreed. And I think, too, it was interesting because Holly Flax, or Melanie, brought up the fact
really
that she...
took it hard after that divorce with Michael.
As soon as I saw her, I saw Holly Flax. So she had brings up to John and the thing that, most likely relapse back on drugs, whatever. But to me, the way she said it, it seemed as if she's playing up this narrative that she's probably, strung out somewhere or maybe dead or whatever, just to sell it for people to stop looking because she doesn't want them to find her. She'd rather the rumor be that she's dead and she's kind of in the wind, at least for now, than to, put it out there that she may be alive. Because, she likes John and she brings up how good of and decent of a guy he is in her AA meeting. But she doesn't really know John all that well, and she knows that he's working hand in hand with the Siegel family. So yeah, I agree with you. I think the line about women's rights and her new founded interest in that and how she really dove in and, to her grandfather's point, found her path, probably led her down the path that she is in now. She found her path and she found her passion, but it rubbed people the wrong way, and now she's put herself in this situation.
I do also want to add, I do think there is a high possibility the reason she was driven towards the women's rights movement is, again, there's a very big part of a clue, if you will, for John. Maybe not for us, but for John, was the pictures of Olivia's mother that he found in the suitcase. I'm personally, again, I'm taking leaps here, early information in the show, but that her finding those pictures either led her to believe or led her to evidence that her mother had been exploited. And that was what drove her so strongly and so quickly to the women's rights movement. Horrible timing for the Siegel family if it just so happened that her stepbrother was currently, under investigation or about to be exposed for maybe doing some exploitation himself. Because as we see at the scene in the studio, oh, they're taking care of these 8 women and nothing's going to come of it. That won't be an issue.
And that would be a really good reason on why Davy and her father seem nonchalant at best about where she is and if she would come back. I mean, the idea that she might be gone because she knew about Davy's exploits and decided she wanted to go out there and say something, and that would obviously ruin, everything that they were doing. And they bring it up as her father is walking down with other producers talking about the movie and how, if this all comes out or the 8th witness was to, not sign an NDA and go and tell the press that the movie that he's making, Davy's comeback would just be shot and it'd be over. And it's an interesting line in there too, how she talks about you made the cardinal rule of a producer, you put your own money into it, which could be his money or it could very well be the money of the people that we see at the end of episode 2. And there's probably a little more danger involved in this movie not getting out and not getting made and coming back profitable than just losing $60 million of his own money, which, in the end of the day, he'd probably be fine anyway because his father's rich enough that, he wouldn't be homeless. So there might be a tie-in to where the funding for the project came from and how it's important that these stories don't get out to the public. But speaking of the mobster characters at the end of it, what did you get from that scene? Because that was a switch up from what we were getting for the first episode and all the way up until that point. It kind of changed the tone of the show, a couple scenes. So what did you take from that last 2 or 3 minutes of the show in episode 2?
I got a lot from it, if you'll allow me to speculate wildly a little bit here, Chris, because I think that scene at the end of episode 2 may have been what really ties everything together. Obviously, we talked about, who John is, but then why we think Olivia's in the situation she is, the Siegel family, what they're doing. But the reason this could all come together is I would speculate that Carmen was one of the women that Davy was in trouble with potentially. And this mobster group led by Stallings was sent by the Siegel family, I'll say, to quote unquote take care of her, right? Whether they initially meant that as signing an NDA, whatever that might be, and it just potentially had gone too far. That part I don't think is too wild. Here's where I'll take a leap. And, any of you listening to us today, and Chris, even you right now, you could maybe tell me I'm crazy, but my theory here is that Olivia was with Carmen. We know that John saw that her car had been to that location multiple times recently. Olivia might have been there when Carmen was killed. And Olivia, or someone she was with, killed Stallings' man, his best man. And that's why he was in her trunk. The reason Olivia is gone is because she knows she just committed this act. And she goes into hiding, assisted by Melanie, who knows she only did it because she was standing up for her fellow woman in Carmen that she knew was being taken advantage of, and is trying to help cover for her, which is again why she's so, to use her words, cagey now that she's sober when answering questions to John. So that scene said a lot to me because I think there was so many different pieces going in different directions that again, a little bit of jumps on my part trying to piece the clues together, but I do think that is a logical track we could take moving forward that we could see coming true.
No, that all makes perfect sense. I follow it, and after listening to you talk about it, it kind of brought the show into a different perspective for me. And something else to remember is most likely Stallings cares about this particular incident more because of the cell phone and information that Olivia may have after killing or being around the moment when his guy was killed and put in the back of the trunk. So I would think that although he cares about the fact that one of his better enforcers or men was killed, he's more interested in the information because he talks about it quite a bit in that scene that is now out into the public that he doesn't want out there.
He definitely looks like a good enforcer, by the way. That's an Andre the Giant stand-in. If they
Oh
ever made
yeah,
one.
yeah. He's a very typecast looking dude. So with all that said, it's only the first 2 episodes. There's a lot of story to go. We're probably gonna change up our theory along the way. But the question that I have for all you listening out there, and you can put it in the comments, whether you're listening on YouTube or Spotify or want to hit us up on Twitter or Instagram. What do you think John Sugar's background is? What do you think his prior story is? Why does he have this skill set? What did he do that maybe gave him the tics or things that he has going on now in his life?
Yeah, so that'll wrap it up for us this week. We appreciate you following us to the new name Screen Sleuths, or if you're just finding us, like and subscribe to let the algorithm know that we're on the right track. But until then, we'll be watching episode 3 next week, and we'll be talking to you then.